So, over the last couple of weeks, we have talked about how to meet the current moment. Of course, it's February 2025, and there is a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos, and a lot of anxiety around the future of NIH funding and federal research grant funding more broadly. So, today I wanted to talk about diversifying your funding portfolio and the options that might be available to you to help you pivot. If you're new around here, my name is Sarah Dobson. I'm a research grant consultant, and my team and I help early career researchers get funded at NIH. And even though my specialty, of course, is NIH grants and has been for a long time, one of the things I have been saying, I would say primarily to my clients and my students over the years, is that NIH is not the be-all, end-all, in spite of what you may think, what your institution may tell you, the expectations that your institution has for bringing in NIH funding and what that means for tenure and promotion. The reason that I think it's important to mention that is that your institution is also needing to rethink things at the moment. And that's my opinion, of course, but there has been an over-reliance on NIH funds for most major research-intensive universities. And that's, there's a good reason for that. And it's because NIH is the largest biomedical research funder in the world by a long shot. And it's easy to rely on an organization of its size and scope because that's what it's there to do, right? That's what it has been there to do all along. But of course, in the current political landscape, a lot of that is coming into question, and the future of biomedical research funding from NIH is it's up in the air. And so one of the ways to mitigate that, or to think more broadly about the impact that you can make as a scientist, is to think about where else your research might be welcomed, where else your research might have a good home. And I think this is especially important for scientists whose work focuses on health inequities and addressing health inequities, because of course that is one of the sort of broad areas that the current administration is scrutinizing. And I think that is one of the areas that is most at risk in terms of your ability to pursue your research as you have been doing over the years. And so for those of you who do health inequities research, with obviously that covers a lot of ground. There are other avenues, other opportunities for you to pursue, and those are certainly worth investigating now if you have not already been doing so. So before we get into some of the strategies to think about how to pivot, how to diversify your non-federal sources of funding, I just want to remind you that one of the things to be doing even before you start seeking out other sources of funding is to prepare for that, is to think about how you can communicate the value of your research to new audiences. And of course, communicating the value of your research is one of the core principles that I teach in the grant consulting work I do and the grant writing educational work that I do. And that is funding agency agnostic, right? The principle stands no matter where you are submitting an application or seeking funding, right? You have to be able to communicate the value of your research. And what that actually means is that you are aligning the outcomes of the work that you do with the interests, with the mission and the priorities of the funding agency that you are targeting. The way that I normally teach this is in terms of NIH institutes and centers, right? So depending on the NIH institute or center that you are targeting, you would want to make sure that the way that you're describing the significance and the impact and the outcomes of your research, that is all aligned with the mission and priorities of the NIH institute or center that you are targeting. And many of you have research that spans multiple institutes and centers, and so it's really a matter of sort of choosing the one that is most relevant, or the one where you feel you have the best chances of success, and making sure that you are framing and focusing the significance and impact and outcomes of your work so that it aligns with the interests of the institute or center that you think is going to be most responsive to your work. But again, of course, that applies more broadly to any funding agency, whether that's a private foundation, whether that's internal grant funds at your own institution, right? It's about creating that win-win. It's about saying, here's what you want to accomplish, and here's how the work that I do, the research that I do, can help you accomplish that mission. Here's how what I do is important to what you do. And that core principle applies no matter where you are seeking funding. Right? So when you're thinking about communicating the value of your work to a broader audience or a new audience, keep that piece in mind. What does that new audience care about? What matters to them? And how can you speak about your research in a way that matters to that audience? That is a core grantsmanship principle that I really want to underline for you. That's going to be really important as you look around for alternative funding sources and begin to pivot to other agencies, other foundations, and so on, right? So when it comes to actually finding new sources of funding, that can be really tricky and sort of baffling, right? Where do you even begin? How are you supposed to find these funding sources? So my first recommendation to you is at first, look within your institution. I mean this in a few ways. I mean, of course, internal funds that are available to you to either bridge some funding that you already have, or maybe through internal grants within your institution that can support projects and initiatives that you are working on. So that's number one. And number two is your research support office and any resources or supports that they would have to help you find funding that is going to be suitable for the type of work that you do. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say look to your institution first. It's both for funding that is available within your institution to support you, small grants, internal institutional grants, but it's also making sure that you are aware of and using the resources available to you within your institution that are there to support your research through your research support office, or whatever it's called at your institution. So that's number one. And number two is, of course, if we're talking about non-federal funding sources, there's a lot out there, and it can be hard to navigate all of those sources. But one of the things you can do, and I will say this as somebody who is very cautious about using AI in grant writing for a bunch of reasons, which I will get into in a series later this year. But I think one of the ways that you can use AI in grant writing very effectively is to help you search for funding sources that are most relevant and most aligned with the type of research that you do. And so what I recommend that you try is creating a prompt that explains the type of research that you do, where you are located, and then to ask the tool to provide options for you at the national and the state and the local levels, and give you reasons why those sources of funding fit with your research. And then, of course, you would need to do a lot more legwork to confirm those. But what that will do is help you narrow down some of those opportunities right off the bat and help you find some of the most useful sources, hopefully some of the most useful sources of non-federal funds for you. The last thing I'll say about diversifying your funding portfolio and pivoting in this moment is to make sure that you are prepared, right? So we've talked about learning to communicate the value of your research to new audiences, but make sure that you're actually ready for that, right? So whether it's sort of a high-level summary of the research that you do, and some of the big questions that you're interested in answering that you can hand to a potential funder if an opportunity materializes. There might be, for example, philanthropic opportunities at your institution that come up, especially in this moment where people are looking to help in new and different ways. There might be more opportunities for philanthropic support through your own institution. So make sure that you are ready for those by having something that you can hand to someone to let them know what it is that you do, to hand or to send, right? And so again, keeping in mind that you want to make sure that however it is that you are describing your research is for a non-subject matter expertise type of audience, right? Remember that in most cases, the new audience that you will be speaking to does not have the same depth of expertise that you do in a particular area, and it's important to be able to zoom out a little bit and explain your research in ways that are accessible to a non-expert audience. So if you need to practice that or refine that skill, that would be something to do. But having a half a page or a one page available that summarizes your research at a high level is always useful to have. And then if there are specific projects that you've had to, say, pivot from NIH funding and that are essentially ready to go, and you are prepared to pursue those if funding becomes available, then making sure that you have a similar sort of one-page description of that work as well. And of course, if you've submitted this elsewhere, you would have your AIMS page. You would have your AIMS page ready to go. And again, you might need to sort of take what you wrote on your AIMS page and kind of zoom out just a little bit so that it is more accessible to a non-expert audience. But again, just being prepared, being ready to meet the opportunities as they come is really important, and also to help you sort of ground yourself in the work that you do and find those opportunities as you're searching for ways to pivot and diversify. So again, we know that this is a challenging moment for folks, and not not a welcome moment for anyone, right? Nobody wants this to be happening, but being prepared, being nimble, being open to other funding sources, other opportunities, is going to allow you to pursue the research that matters to you and worry a lot less about the source of funding, right? Because ultimately that is what is most important. It's not the source of funding, not the prestige of the funder. It's the ability to pursue the research, to carry out your program of research, and to make the impact that you want to make. And so finding new ways to do that is what is required in this moment for many of you. So I hope that helps, and I will see you next time.